Yeah, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order.
You keep 'em busy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't put it on my.
First on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Are there any changes to the
Together.
agenda?
Unless I'm reading something different.
And is there a motion to approve the agenda as stands? Motion by Mitchell. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Catherine. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carries and the agenda is approved. Next are the approval of the February 2nd minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes as sent?
I'll be abstaining.
Okay. Going through, I did notice, I wanted clarification on page 5 of 8. Item number 23, it was a comment by Victoria Vioc. Halfway through it, quotes, says the majority of the merchants do not want change. And I believe you actually said the majority of the merchants, it's not that they didn't want change. Is that correct? I'll read the entire thing for you if you want. Victoria Vioc, pleased with discussion. Many merchants were concerned once they saw new construction at 300 block that it would happen all along Fifth Street. She says the majority of merchants do not want change. If a building gets torn down, gets rebuilt to match the area. I thought you said that it's the majority of the merchants, it's not that they don't want change. Is that correct?
If it's big, it should look historic, like it belongs in the area.
Correct. But you weren't saying that people don't want change. Okay, that was the only thing that I thought was incorrect with the minutes. Any other changes? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes as changed? So moved by Steve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Catherine. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And then abstentions? Abstained by Scott. All right, and the motion carries. Minutes are approved. All right, moving forward, we will go ahead and do the opening statement. Opening statement, Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee. Welcome all to the Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee meeting. This committee is made up of independent volunteer citizens. The makeup of the committee was determined by the mayor and city council. The committee is not part of the city administration. The steering committee is served in our efforts by the city of West Des Moines staff. The committee's purpose is to, 1, partner with the city of West Des Moines to build interest, excitement, awareness, and community consensus around a comprehensive strategy for historic West Des Moines by representing the diverse interests of current businesses, residents, and investors. Number 2, work towards updating the master plan to address growth and redevelopment going forward into the future. Number 3, make recommendations and provide guidance to City Council on matters pertaining to the creation, revising, and implementation of the historic West Des Moines Master Plan. It is our goal that the meeting be orderly. We encourage discussion, but recognize the fact that there will be differences of opinion. We request that everyone is shown mutual reverence and discussions are conducted in a respectful manner. To ensure the meeting does not become unnecessarily lengthy, we ask that everyone's testimony be focused on new facts or evidence not already presented. If you wish to speak, please come forward, wait to be recognized by the chair, then state your name and address for the record. Rules for public comment. When speaking, members of the public should state their name and address prior to making their comments. Each member of the public will be given 5 minutes to speak. All statements at the meeting shall be directed to the committee, and cross-conversation among those in attendance is prohibited. Questions shall be directed first to the chair, who then may ask the proper person to answer, with such answer also being directed to the committee. When the opportunity for public comment is closed, the public may only address the committee if a question is directed to them. In closing, this committee does not make final decisions. All recommendations made will be forwarded to Plan and Zoning Commission and City Council final action. Now going forward, we will open up citizens forum. If there's anyone that would like to make a comment to the committee that is not already on an agenda item, they may do so by coming up to the podium here and stating your name and address. Yes, hello, I'm Dave.
Hello, yeah, on the Second Street. Can I get the clicker or do I?
If it'll be easier if you just say no.
Okay, that's fine. So like you guys know, now that we're past somewhat Fifth Street, we start looking into Valley Junction area more broadly. As you guys know, Valley Junction is really the only walkable neighborhood in West Des Moines, and that's without doing too much to actually get there. It's just the way it was built and it's actually walkable. And we have a few, but so I want to talk about crosswalks. I have a few crosswalks. Next slide, please. Like this one on Fifth Street that are well marked. And, those markings are high visibility. They confer the advantages of marked crosswalks and that, it says, hey, a pedestrian might be here. So, increase safety, driver awareness. Unfortunately, next slide, we don't have a whole lot of them. There's a few clustered around Fifth Street, 8th and Vine, and a couple around the school, but overall, most of our crosswalks, next slide, are like this one at 4th and Vine, where there are no markings at all. And this is actually one of the better unmarked crosswalks, since there's actually a four-way stop. Most of the crosswalks that we have that are unmarked, next slide, and there are a lot of them, or you can just kind of just drive on through without any thought for pedestrian. So as you can see, like the proportion of marked to unmarked crosswalks is pretty bad. It's a little bad in a walkable area. And we have a few easier streets. So Pine being the main east-west corridor, it has a whole two stop signs. 8th Street, 4th Street, from south. Parking lots on Fifth that they support. Next slide. But there are also a fair number of streets where drivers don't have to stop at intersections or stop at very few intersections, mostly going east and west. Next slide. So as you can see, there are quite a few unmarked crossings on those streets that where drivers are just don't have to stop. There's nothing to indicate that, hey, a pedestrian might be here. So as you guys move forward, talk about the rest of Valley Junction, I would like you guys to consider pushing the city to mark more crosswalks. I'm sorry, pretty huge. Next slide. More of this. Actually, since we're at Valley Junction, maybe a little bit of whimsy would be good. Next slide. So maybe something a little more like this.
That's really, I love it.
Thank you.
The marketing theme.
Thank you very much for your comments tonight. Anyone else for citizens forum?
You don't happen.
Good, how are you?
Okay, then we'll go ahead and proceed with the agenda.
And actually, I do want to make,
Oh, gosh, yes.
you did get some written comments that on the dais. In front of you. We have a collective that came to us in a PDF. That'll be added to the record in the minutes of these. So make sure that you guys are aware that these comments are part of the citizen form, that these individuals cannot personally.
Customary to read these comments during the meeting or just have them for our use?
Typically, they're just for the record, but I would urge you to read them at some point in time and consider them before you take action.
Thank you for that. Okay, we'll proceed with next on the agenda. Discussion of historic design guidelines. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike and Aaron and Ed. How are you all? Oh, I think you're on mute, Mike.
All right, we are good. Thank you. Pleasure to be here virtually again with you tonight and continue our conversation. Erin is actually going to run the PowerPoint, so I think she'll be pulling that up in a second. But essentially what we wanted to do is kind of give you a quick recap from the discussion at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on Monday night, which went well. Then talk a little bit about historic districts. We had a lengthy conversation about that last time, and I don't think we got through everything everybody wanted to, so I want to continue that conversation. And then we want to go back to the design guidelines and focus a little bit on railroad avenues. So those are the main topics for tonight, and obviously anything else you want to cover that we have time to do, but that's really kind of where we want to focus. So Aaron, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And the next one. So, you know, we went through the design guidelines for the first 40 pages with the Plan and Zoning Commission last night, and you guys already know this process that we've been going through, but and we split the guidelines into looking at the mixed use historic area and railroad and transition. I'll be talking about here later. Next slide. And here's kind of some of the comments that came out of the meeting last night. In general, they voted 4-0 with 1 abstention to recommend approval of these and sent them on to the city council next Monday night's meeting. Comments were generally all positive. There were a couple of additional suggestions made by Nick at the meeting. None of those were incorporated into the version that's going forward. However, Nick, if you're there, and I can't see you, but they were good comments, and we can continue to talk about those. And if it makes sense to integrate some of those into the document later on when we're still working through this process, we can still consider that. So I wouldn't rule out additional changes there and refinements as we're going through this. But in general, people were very happy with the process. They complimented the committee on all your hard work so far, and so far so good. It's my quick assessment of that. So let's get into talking about the historical district that we have now and where we're going with those kind of things. As everybody knows, there's an existing National Historic District in this area that does have 53 contributing structures. That area is available for all the historic tax credits that are out there. And really, all those structures do certainly contribute to the feel and character of this area. And I think everybody loves this area, at least in part because of those buildings, right? And the character and the feel that they give you in this charming area. But we all know that there are some structures even outside of the boundaries of this that contribute to the history and the character of the area. So next slide. And actually next slide, we don't really need to look at this one. Okay, keep going. Somehow we didn't edit those out. Wait a minute, what happened to the, Aaron, is this the final one? Because I didn't
pull it up. Hold on.
Yeah, this is the one before that. I had another slide. But basically, what that slide was talking about was at our last meeting and was recently emailed back out to you was the larger study that was done back in 1998. And it was called the Architectural and Historical Reconnaissance Survey of the Valley Junction area. And it looked at a much bigger area than just what is in that National Historic District. It included a lot of the residential neighborhood around here going up to Vine to the north and farther east to the west. They had a lot more good information in it. Ed has reviewed that document and can certainly discuss it if you guys like specifically, but I think in general, we thought it was a great document. However, it's kind of an aged document at this point. So it probably, if looking at a larger, either a local district or some other celebration of history makes sense to you, maybe it's appropriate to consider updating that. But I know that the last meeting we had a lot of conversation about kind of telling the stories of the area and the stories of different buildings and, you know, going into that. And so I guess I'm hoping that the committee had a chance to look at that document. And if so, just wanted to ask the question, what you thought about it. Is it kind of the thing you guys were talking about and thinking about? Do you think it needs to go further if we were to recommend doing something else with that? Love your input on that. I would say that, you know, a typical recommendation coming out of a plan like this would be to consider updating a document like that. So it's something that we had been thinking about in the implementation steps for the overall master plan. We really hadn't been thinking about doing it immediately, but kind of just wanted to open it up for comments, first of all, on your thoughts of that existing survey and, you know, if you think it's appropriate to pursue updating that at some point in time.
Comments from the committee?
know if I fully understand. I'm going to be honest. I heard Mark saying that too. So can you, sorry.
What document?
Mike, yeah.
Yeah.
What document?
Stupid.
Yeah, it's
I'll be
it's
the brave
titled,
one and ask the question.
it's entitled The Architectural Historical Reconnaissance Survey of the Valley Junction Area in West Des Moines, Iowa. It's dated April 1998 and it was prepared by Bear Creek Archaeology.
And just to kind of give everybody an update,
Oh, I've been in meetings all day.
Too much.
there was, back when we met on this February 2nd, we had a lot of conversations about, well, what's out there? What studies are there? What's happened? On that date, on the 3rd, I emailed one historical document to you. And then on the 3rd, Christine emailed the one that's in question. This morning, to make sure that everybody had it and that it was kind of fresh on your mind, I forwarded that email today. So it is the one that Scott's holding in his hand. So
Sorry.
we try to provide multiple opportunities to get the historic information in front of you. But at the same time, I think that the explanation is obviously necessary if Ed can possibly elaborate on what's there.
Yeah, Ed, you want to chime in a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. I could understand the audio here a little bit, but yes, can you hear me okay? I'm in my conference room with audio things like that.
You're good.
Okay, so that, as Mike mentioned, that report that was done in 1998, which is approaching 25 years, it's 24 years now, more than 24 years ago. So it's a little dated, but that document is not a historic resources survey. It's a reconnaissance survey, which, yeah, a lot of those properties were probably done by what we call a windshield survey. You don't really necessarily get out of your car. You look at it, take a photograph. You might get some information, one or two elements about it, but it doesn't really go in depth about its history, perhaps its significance, its character, its architectural style, and all that. So it's a good survey. Someone thought about it more than 25 years or almost 25 years ago to do something like this. It's a good start. But if y'all been talking about your expanded area of the National Register listing beyond 53 properties, and I totally agree. I think you have a lot more significant properties in not just the district, but perhaps other areas in town, which, when you spread the net a little further out. But a historic resources survey gets a little more in depth into what is the history of the properties, who designed it, who lived there, what happened there, what event. It may get to that, or it may just hit the surface and be a reconnaissance survey, which is, here's the character, it's got this type of roof, it's a residential, it could just be at that level. So the historic resource.
Hey, Ed, can I interrupt you for a second? Ed?
Sure.
I'm kind of reading the room here a little bit, and I think that maybe we need to kind of break down exactly the document just a little bit more. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to share my screen of the report, and I'm going to bring up, for example, one of the buildings, one of the houses that they've looked at. And if you could just walk us through, how does the average person go about reading this type of thing and understanding it? Is that something that could possibly work for everybody, to try to get a better understanding of what we're actually looking at?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to do that, Ed, or can you hear me?
Yep, and we have a comment from Ralph here too.
And not to confuse the matter, but I think what I'm looking for is some type of historical preservation guidelines for a particular area. And while this information is interesting, it's great reading material, I don't think we need that information specifically, but rather guidelines so we can get on the daily business of preserving our community in this area.
Are you stating you want guidelines to properties that are historically significant or designated?
Or an area, the area of, I'm thinking, we have the guidelines. And we would have historic preservation guidelines that, and then we would have zoning. I think that's the focus of our committee at this point in time, not going out beyond the scope of that and delve into these other areas. Like I said, for me, it's very interesting and entertaining, but I don't know if it is necessarily something that I want to be addressing at this point in time. I'd like us to get on with the business of getting the historical district guidelines put in place with your recommendations, as well as moving into the zoning phase as we're coming up to some calendar deadlines.
Yeah, well, our design guidelines now do address what you're asking. They have standards for historic, at least for the 53 that have already been designated on the National Register listing. So that is complete. I guess what we're talking about here is future. If you all want to do that, that's how you want to get a historic resources survey to spread that. But right now we have everything covered that is designated on the National Register listing of how to handle rehabs and renovations. That's already included in our design guidelines.
So what you're saying basically, but Mike, you're saying this is part of the scope of work, is what you're suggesting is updating the survey, the architectural survey?
No, it is not
Okay.
part of our current scope of work. What I'm saying is that if there's continued interest in creating a local district that goes beyond what your current national district, then a recommendation coming out of the plan for future implementation would be for the city to look at one of these historical resource surveys that is talking about, but it's not part of our current scope.
Okay. So first committee, is that something that you want to explore?
I guess I thought on the scope of work, evaluating what these buildings were and the stance of them, I thought that was part of the scope of work. I thought that was in there to begin with.
It is, but what they're talking about is,
Handing the district.
right. And so it was brought up, I believe, last week that not only with the conversation of having a preservation ordinance is if you want to expand it past the commercial district into the residential area, you'd have to do that to do that. And so that's what they're talking about, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, and again, this is the future. Right now, the present, from these design guidelines, the 53 properties that have been designated are already on the National Register listing. You have no other designation program currently in your town. So that's all we can go by. To do a historic resources survey would be another project that is not part of this, because that would, these are not, this is spending a lot of time surveying these properties, but that's not necessarily part of what the purview of this project is. What we did was we looked at what was already designated and created the design guidelines and the standards for not just historic properties, significant designated properties, but also for all your properties in the district, which you see in the document with materials, colors, and all that. We really get into depth into those elements. But if we're looking in the future, I would highly recommend, where we would is to do this historic research. But if you're going to if you do look at it as become a certified local government, there's grants and resources that you can get from a number of places that can pay for a historic resource survey or other programs. So there's a lot of avenues to do this so that the city doesn't have to pay for the whole thing, and they can get funding for it.
And I will say Debbie and Julie had their hand raised online.
Okay, perfect. We'll go with Debbie.
Thank you. To Ralph's comment, at the end of the text of the document, there are several comments that address the issues that about historic preservation in terms of restoration, et cetera. that are pretty consistent, and Ed, of course, would know more about this, with the Secretary of Interior guidelines, et cetera, that speak to maybe some of what you might be talking about. You might look at that. And then Clyde, I believe that there's some place in this document that says that the section which I haven't been able to see, I don't think it's been posted online, for old photographs are stored in the city development office. Would it be possible to get some copies of those so that we could have access to that information?
I believe, and Christine or Brad may want to comment, I think we did copy all of those and we scanned all of them, and I think we sent those out.
Debbie, are you talking about this
98.
ones that go with 1998?
Yes, on that document, there is a section that refers to old photographs, and if that was sent out at a previous time, could we find out if that is on the West Des Moines Master Plan website, or where that reference point would be, because that would certainly be interesting.
You have to scan it all in. We have not scanned it in. It's a binder thick of historical photos. So we're working on that. But yes, we're making it a high priority.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Julie?
Yeah, so I wanted to address the comment about this reconnaissance survey. And so my understanding was the conversation last time was we were talking a lot about the contributing buildings. And the comment was there are more contributing buildings in the area than just along 5th Street, that the map that we've kind of been referring to over and over again indicated. And so we thought that this reconnaissance survey might add the additional buildings people had in mind, so that when we talk about contributing buildings, it's the comprehensive list of contributing buildings, including the telephone building and maybe some of the cottages and whatnot. And so I guess my question to the group is that do people remember that similar? And does that reconnaissance survey extend that group of contributing buildings? Do we now have them all, or are we getting close to having them all if we include the reconnaissance survey buildings?
Might be an Ed question.
Yeah.
Is that for me? Sorry. I highly doubt that you can use a reconnaissance survey to determine that that's contributing or significant. There's not enough information in that survey. I'm not saying that right now the reconnaissance survey includes approximately 800 residential buildings and 150 commercial buildings. So you're talking about almost 1,000 properties that are included in that reconnaissance survey. I called some colleagues who do historic resources survey. That's all they do. And I talked to them this week about this, and for them to do one of my colleagues did a survey in Belvidere, Illinois, about 1,000 properties. It took them 10 years to do that. Usually a historic survey is about 150 properties for like a chunk. And because it takes time, you got to spend the hours to go to the site. You've got to spend hours looking at and research. A lot of them that I talked to said, well, how much information does West Des Moines have on these properties? How much is in the library? How much? And all of that has to be done. And let's just say they charge $100 an hour. Let's say four hours per property, and you do the math and the time too. So it takes a long time. This is probably a year, 9 months. They told me to finish a historic research, a real good one that is worth and merits to determine or designate that these are contributing historic structures. Because there's a science to this. There's a method that has to happen to make sure that you can defend its merit of a historic structure. So I think the reconnaissance survey is a good start for someone. If you hired someone past this meeting and past this project to go through, and then you determine, hey, let's do the first 150. Where do you want that to be in the commercial and then maybe span out into the residential? And then you get that document. And then you just add that on to your local designation, including the 53 contributing.
So Ed, in order to do a historic preservation district, you're saying that we need to do this year-long investigation?
Yeah, it takes a while. I mean, a consultant that you're gonna hire is not gonna, they're just not gonna, they need time to do all the research on 150 properties. It's a lot of properties. It's a lot of work. Because you can't just, a property can't just be designated, say, oh, someone says, I think, it's historic. Well, there has to be more than that. You gotta get, it's just like if any of you have master's degrees and you did a thesis, it's like doing a mini thesis project on every property so you can defend its significance. So this is something, many towns do this. It's not out of the reach. You may get a grant or two to pay for it, so you don't have, the city doesn't have to pay for it if you become a certified local government. That's how most cities do this.
I don't know, maybe I drank some bad water today, but I don't fully comprehend why we're talking about this and why we aren't talking about establishing our own historical district as opposed to one that's set forth by some federal guidelines, which we don't really need unless we're looking for money or recognition of some type. I think what we want to do is we want to have a plan that this committee puts forth to supplement the design guidelines. And then in addition to that, start getting into the meat and potatoes of the zoning stuff so we can move things along. I think that's where I feel we need to be. This would be this is a grandiose idea from my perspective, in all honesty, that has future merit. But right now we have action that we need to implement to preserve existing buildings, to preserve the character of the area, et cetera.
So it was brought up at the last meeting about the preservation ordinance. And in order to do the preservation ordinance, you would have to go in some of these steps in order to do that.
Not if we say we don't. It's that simple. We want to follow somebody else's guideline. But we can determine our own path.
Okay.
We're a big enough, competent enough group with enough historical understanding of the area. Most of us have lived here a longer period of time to understand what's going on. To go through all of this is detrimental to us successfully implementing things in a faster time frame, so we can, in all honesty, be respectful of property owners, the developers, and everybody, so they understand that. Nate brought a document the city of Des Moines is using. Now, in reviewing that, I would say that's probably a little bit more what you'd ever want to consider. But it's a foundation, and I would like to think that maybe the consultants could walk us through that, providing us with some type of that ordinance to that effect, similar to what you just said, Meredith.
I think too, if we are going to go down the path of having a historic preservation ordinance, I would probably want to take the guidance of some experts who have done it before too. And, if, Ed and has done it before, then I'm probably going to lean on the side of his expertise, and Steve Breivert has sat on two commissions as well too. So I'm probably going to want to hear, what he has to say about some of those as well. And, other Main Street districts and kind of how they run it as well too. So that's where I'm kind of.
No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
I guess for you, Michael, are you of the understanding, or do you have the capability to help us with putting together some historical preservation ordinance to complement our design guidelines so we're hitting on all cylinders?
I have not done a historic preservation ordinance myself. I don't know, maybe Ed has specifically. I mean, I think, it's honestly outside of my area of expertise.
I think what we can do is just give you general guidelines, because each municipality does it differently, slightly different. Like y'all have your own ordinance different than your next door neighbor municipality. But I think we could add, Michael, an appendix on our design guidelines, just to say, if you want to go to the path of become a certified local government, which I highly recommend, because there's money for that. You will get The National Park Service gives 10% of one of their budgets to every CLG. Now, there's about 22,700 local governments now throughout the whole country. And West Des Moines could be one of them. And it will open a gate of some funding for the path that it sounds like you want to go after these design guidelines. I have to say though, these design guidelines are a great start to where you're going. And I agree, let's move this forward, let's get this approved, and then move on to the next phase, which would be to do the CLG, get a commission, and then start doing the work that has to be done to expand the historic significance of your town. But most towns don't do it this way. You guys are in a great position because you have a great design guidelines that you can start. So yes, we can do what we think is a step-by-step would be the best appropriate manner for West Des Moines to move forward after design guidelines are approved.
Perfect. And absolutely. And then that brings up a good point too, is, the preservation ordinance isn't in our initial scope of work. So we can kind of carry on with our scope of work. And then afterwards, once we're tasked with all that stuff, then we can address that if necessary too. Okay. Yes.
We talked last time about it's going to city council next Monday, getting some literature on there. Can we at least agree on that? So there's no tear downs in between this.
Do we want to go ahead with agenda items and then we can discuss that at the end of it?
It got brought up last time.
Brought up last time as far as
Needing to do that. That was the purpose of calling this meeting.
yeah, we can definitely discuss that. Absolutely. What are you suggesting?
Mitchell had some literature on it too, just something, no recommendation to go to city council, just saying until we get through this process, no tear downs during that time. I'm not saying no, we got guidelines, so you should be able to go in a remodel and do your facelifts and stuff like that, but.
Mitchell, do you want, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Mitchell, you had suggested some things, not to kind of steer this off topic here, or is everyone okay if we can talk about this now? Or do we want to?
Well, I guess the last time I was putting out there that we figure out a tear down moratorium together.
Right.
That have to be now because apparently we can't discuss things at all outside. So
Before we do, I just want to check timeline with, Mike, Aaron, and Ed too. I know we have agenda items we have to get through. Are your guys' timeline okay if we kind of veer off topic for a second to talk moratorium? Because I know, Mike, you said too that you want to be kind of included in that conversation, or?
Yeah, no, I think, I don't want to have a 2-hour conversation on it, but if we want to take 15 minutes and talk about it, absolutely, now's a great time to do it.
Okay, fantastic. Just want to make sure. Okay, Mitchell, continue, sorry.
If I may?
Yes.
At that point, could you please put a time limit, a reasonable time limit on that discussion so that everyone does have an opportunity for an input, but that, we don't extend it very long?
Absolutely. What sounds like a reasonable time limit for everyone here?
Couple weeks.
20 minutes?
Never. How about never?
I think it's not to exceed 20 minutes. Sound good? I think 15 sounds.
Quick.
We'll go fast.
All righty,
Let's just work
fantastic.
together.
I think we're actually pretty good.
Hey,
I think 15 will sound generous.
we can move this forward. I want to try to understand. You're talking about instituting some type of moratorium that would prohibit somebody from tearing the building down. Like you're talking about anywhere within the study area, you're talking about just Fifth Street or the first two blocks of Fifth Street or?
I think.
That's open for discussion. That's what I.
Yeah, that's up for discussion. I think. I don't want to speak out of context. Solely we need to look at Fifth Street, but that'd be my main concern.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to figure out what we're.
I think the biggest thing is we don't want to restrict these business owners from, we got guidelines, right? So they need to go in and do their facelifts and remodel and maintenance. They need to do their maintenance. And I don't think this will restrict that really.
I think as long as, if people want to do facade improvements.
Everything but tear down.
They adhere to the guidelines, absolutely. So if someone wants to, paint the facade, as long as it adheres to the guidelines or anything, or, put a different material on it, as long as it adheres to the guidelines, I think that should be a reason.
Anything but tear down.
Yeah, I just want to make it very clear that the city council don't skew that how they want, like, oh, this project would be a good one and let's talk about it. I just want it to be cut and dry,
I
black and
think you have
white.
to have a timeline though, don't you?
Again, are you talking about a specific geographic area or are you talking about just the buildings that were considered contributing or with, so that I just
I
want.
think the study area up Fifth Street, I think we need to discuss.
So the mixed use commercial district,
So you're talking
Fifth
like
Street?
Fifth Street from, railroad up to Silvis then, or?
So I'll chime, this is the blurb I have written down that I basically said at the last meeting, kind of near the end. So the building demolition moratorium would generally apply to the area of the 1 and 200 blocks of Fifth Street in the Historic Valley Business District. It more specifically covers all buildings in that area that are classified as contributing properties as of February 1st, 2022 or something like, just pick a date or something. Now I have a bunch, we can just talk about that alone, and then we need to talk about exceptions so that people can fix their buildings, patch holes, rain's coming. But we need to define if we're going to do this, and I'm assuming that at the end of this 15 minutes, we need to come to a motion, right? Is that not okay, so. Here, yeah.
Just a question, I think the first thing we need to do is define the area in question. I think it could be the whole blocks, just those 3 blocks. So I think we need to open it up for conversation, define that first, and then our next step.
so are you going off the zone that we created for mixed use commercial or are you just going off Fifth Street?
It's
Do we want to put that up on the screen, maybe? So
Are you
everybody
thinking-
knows what we're talking about.
Yep. And are you thinking,
Maybe we should do the mixed use area,
I would say just Fifth Street.
because there's other contributing buildings outside of that.
So you're thinking Fifth Street, Maple and,
I don't know if Michael can share a screen.
No. There are no contributing buildings outside those, outside that.
In the mixed use,
Historic.
there are no
Yeah,
contributing.
just, I would say, use
outside of,
use the boundary of the historic district.
The historic district boundary.
Mhm.
Right, maybe that's what we should go with.
Yeah,
What about your place, Renee?
It's not in the mixed use.
Yeah, we're not
You're not
talking
planning to tear
about
down your house
houses.
anytime soon, or you're
Yeah, you're.
I'm just curious.
Okay, so maybe we
Idea.
should talk about mixed use. Mixed use area.
so the map basically for the contributing properties.
We're talking the red area.
2 different maps.
Yep.
The historic district, there are no contributing buildings outside the National Register Historic District. The contributing isn't, that's not just a word we're using, that's a definition according to the National Park Service. So are we looking at the existing National Register District or the red zone?
I think we should go with the red zone.
I think the red zone.
I think the red,
I disagree. 100 and 200 block, that's it.
well, there's other buildings.
No, just 100.
And there are a few in the 300 block.
There's other buildings in 300 block.
And-
We should be looking.
And don't forget, there's some on the side streets as well.
I recognize that, but I see the 100 and the 200 block when I have conversations with the people who talk about their emotional connection to the Valley Junction. It's that 1 and 200 block is the heart of Valley Junction. I mean, those are where the beautiful buildings are that we do have.
No, it's the whole,
It's more than that. Expand more than
yeah.
2 blocks.
Then we have to talk about when this ends.
Not everyone.
I'd like to speak.
Yes,
Motion, and then we could vote on the options.
I think we're still having discussion. Before we have a motion, I think we need to get some public comment as well. If you would like to make comment, if you wouldn't mind, walking up to the podium here, please.
Get a friend.
Last city council, my name is Frank Duncan, West Des Moines, Iowa, all his life. This is not the best one part of our lives. I asked the mayor, and you were there. I was on the city council from 1970 to 1980 in West Des Moines. And I served first ward as Kevin does. And we had a spat over this streets and where they can go and all. And we decided that we were not gonna allow people to come in, bulldoze over the 4th and 5th and 6th. That we would have to talk with the tenant, not with a whole 24 or 5 people beating down their necks. And I asked Mr. Trimble if he would go back, starting in 1970, if you still have those council meetings, which we had council meetings every Monday night from 7 to midnight, believe it or not. But I have not seen those. And what they said was simply, nobody can come in, push a neighbor out or anything like that. They would have to come through there. They'd have to come through council. And I haven't seen it. Is anybody working for it? Is there anybody that's capable of doing that or been given that?
That would be up to the city clerk's office.
And I have not heard anything on that, Frank, as to whether or not they've been able to.
Who should I go to then?
I'd suggest Tom Haddon and Ryan Jacobson, who's our city clerk.
Okay.
They're the ones we digging through the archives, and those minutes should be still out there.
Well, I would think so. I mean, I know it's a little difficult. They're gonna have to go through that. But we passed an ordinance that not go from, or you could go from 5th Street to Vine on that, and it had to be approved by the council. So if that still exists, which I'd like to see if it is still existing, then you got another problem. Maybe not. Hopefully not, because we could have a much easier place as what we are all talking about.
So Frank, you said that was everything on 5th Street from Railroad to Vine?
Yes. Right,
1970, correct?
1970.
20 years.
I wish I could tell you give you the date. I'm lucky to have it.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, I have not heard anything as to whether or not they've been able to come up with that information or not.
That would be your area. If you ever get the opportunity to see, so. All right. Obviously, I'm not for building the street down from, at least we're down to 200 block now. Let's stop. Let's stop. Historic is important, I think, down here. We have a Catholic church that's been here forever. We have a Methodist church on the west side, same thing. Police station on 5th Street, right next to the theater. Too many things that go on, too many people come on. How many people came this Christmas area over the holidays? It's unbelievable. I honestly came down, thought I'll jump out of the car. 4 blocks north, I found a parking place. That was on all 4 areas. If that doesn't bring in, for the merchants, I can't believe you're barking up the right tree. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Any issues, any programs you want to ask? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be available.
I'll be available.
I am Dean Newman, live on 6th Street, West Des Moines. Lived there all my life. My grandparents grew up across the tracks. A lot of their families grew up across tracks, whether you're Mexican, Black, Italian, whatever, as a community. And you people act like it was nothing back then. To take all these people and move them up here. My grandfather was the last one to leave. He was forced out. This is what I feel like's going on here. People don't want to leave. And when I hear somebody say only the 200 block is historic, means anything to us, you're wrong. It all means something to us. I think you people need to take a little longer look at who you're displacing and start thinking about people instead of this. I watched my grandfather sit out he had 7 acres land back there. Somebody else owns it now. They put him in a 2-bedroom ranch home so he can stare out a window and die. A broken heart. You make your decisions wisely. All of you. Your families were back there too. Don't you forget it. Got it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we all agree that we don't want to see our historic buildings torn down. I think we all at this table agree with that. So as far as defining terms for proposing this moratorium, I think we first have to define what area and timeline. And I think maybe timeline will also help determine what area as well too. So are we talking 6 months? You know, and then kind of maybe come back and reevaluate what's happening, you know? We don't know. As of now, there's probably nothing. Is there anything in the pipeline as far as anything coming down? You know?
I don't like that phrase because we've seen it time and time again.
Okay.
There's always something in the pipeline that we don't know about.
No.
I've heard that at city council multiple times. There's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. And then another one pops up. So.
Sure, sure. And
Out of all
anything can happen at any
Yeah,
time.
out of all respect.
Absolutely. No, of course.
I think we should go with the red district, and I think we really need to look at some of these non-contributing. We need to be timely in this.
Mhm.
I think we need to push forward on their end. Not drag this out. I don't think we need to drag this out. I think we need to do a little bit of research on what's non-contributing to, and then come back to the table and make a decision at that.
Yeah, and to put a timeline on it, you know, Ed talked about that it could take 9 months to a year if you're gonna do this research. And so I don't think it's something that the fast track again, all that's done is cause a lot of
But can
pain
we,
and heartache and frustration for a lot of people.
can we legally do a moratorium without a timeline?
There's the map.
Good. I think in terms of if we limit it to the red area, I mean, we've got a lot of information on, say, all those buildings, at least we're within the boundaries of the historic district.
Mhm.
So you're talking about what's left that wasn't in the boundaries of that historic district. So it's not, Andrew's talking about doing the entire neighborhood, which would take a long time. I'd have to defer to them how long it would take to do the balance of the buildings within that area and within the red area.
And I just want to make clear, are we saying we're connecting the moratorium with possibly the creation of a preservation committee? Because what you're speaking of, what I'm hearing said, being discussed relates to the preservation committee discussion, the process or the creation
I
and
think this is the first step to see if we can move in that direction.
through.
Because there's multiple steps to this. So, I mean, it's just the first step.
I thought 6 months, a year,
Don't know.
that's where we're at.
And put a time frame.
I think we have,
Get to Steve first and then we'll get to the comment. Steve?
Alpha Mitchell, other people have addressed this. They need something to discuss. So I'm just going to make a motion. I'll put it out there. A 6-month demolition moratorium on contributing buildings in the existing National Registered District.
So that's the black area. That's the black area, Steve?
That's the black, that's just.
Black, red, black. So that's the.
Want to write down?
Against. That would be this
So
here.
a demolition a 6-month demolition moratorium
Can all see it?
on contributing buildings. It's
That's a page. It's a different page. The National Register District?
Going on.
Filters building.
The black line is.
The back.
Yep.
Those,
What you thinking?
There.
those aren't contributing.
So demolition moratorium, contributing buildings in the existing registered district.
So then if somebody
Have another.
purchase any property under the mixed district that considered
I'm
not.
not talking about mix, I'm talking
I
about the
understand.
historic.
So my question is, if somebody purchased any of those houses with the expectation that on the mixed.
Keep misrepresenting what he's saying.
I made a motion.
Listen,
Okay, so first what we can do is motion and then there's a second.
Up on the board so everybody can see what they're talking.
So by Robert's rules, we can, there's a motion. If there's a second, then we can continue discussion on the motion. Is there a second to support the motion?
I second the moratorium for the Valley Junction National Registered District.
Okay, so Steve made the motion, Catherine made the second. Now we can have discussion.
Let's do the motion. I like the motion written on the board, exactly, word for word, exactly what what the motion is.
And just a reminder, we have exceeded our 15-minute timeline, so just to see if we can.
I move that we, another 15 minutes.
You said that the moratorium area is basically this boundary here, which is the National Historic District. And the demolition moratorium would apply to those buildings that are considered contributing within that area. That's like 54.
53 buildings, yes,
Okay,
6 months.
we're getting a marker. I know that you repeated it. I want word on there.
Is it in a Word doc?
Reminder.
That'd be probably faster to change.
I can do.
Okay, if I abbreviate.
Big enough.
Right. There is a mobile easel, maybe.
Sorry.
There is a mobile easel, it looks like.
It'll be coming up on the screen here in a minute.
Oh, he's going to get it on the screen so we
We're
can.
gonna get on the bigger screen because not only do we have everybody that's here in the room, there's people at home. And so, Christine is, she was taking minutes and so she pulled up what was said. And, she's gonna make that bigger. So that'll solve the bigger problem for everybody.
I think people got their.
I was trying to see.
Also, Deb, so many non-contributing.
Does anyone have their, Brad, did you say there were comments on the?
Debbie had,
Non-contributing buildings?
No, just contributing is what's,
That's the motion.
Non-contributing buildings, okay.
right,
that's 54 buildings within that
So
boundary.
that's 54.
I had 3 questions come at me all at once. So Debbie's on the phone, or Debbie has a comment.
Yep.
We had one motion that's up on the screen. And then somebody, did you have a comment? Did you have something?
Catherine second.
What was contributing, what's not, or how many?
Kathleen seconded, but okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Now we-
Debbie has so now we're on the discussion of the motion and Debbie had a comment?
Yes, thank you very much. I've thought a lot about time, and I think time is the most valuable resource that anyone ever has. What decisions this committee is making in terms of tearing down buildings is a permanent decision for the buildings that get torn down. Once they're gone, they're gone. And we've had some people speak very eloquently about that in the past meetings. I think it is our responsibility to think about things like what other buildings might there be that we have not yet researched to add to the list of contributing buildings? If we had more contributing buildings, which we just spent the beginning of our meeting talking about, would this enhance our district? Of course it would. So if we rush to a decision, it doesn't have to be postponed for 6 months or a year. If we rush to this decision, then we are determining our fate in a way that has not fully considered all of the stakeholders that are depending on us to make a valid, thorough analysis of what we are doing. So I'm okay with the red district that we have already discussed. But we don't know what other buildings might be worth preserving. And I think we need to give ourselves and our constituents that allowance of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. If you have a-
And I would just like to say, I put a motion on the floor so we could discuss it.
Yeah,
Vote it up, or vote it down. I might vote it down. I don't know. And we need a motion. We need something to talk about.
yeah, absolutely. No, it's a process of it, yeah. Again, and, you know, if we want more time to research this, I mean, we don't have to make a decision tonight either. But the moratorium does expire on March 1st. So if we want to have a resolution to council by first, time to do that.
I'm with Debbie on this. I don't think with how this here, I don't think this gives the opportunity to look at, no, outside of the area.
Is it possible to get the mixed-use commercial district map up on the screen by chance, please?
When this committee was first put together, that was one of the things they were charged with, was to look at all of the buildings in this area and determine what they were originally built as and were used for over the years and what they are now. This hasn't happened. No.
And he said he agreed with the survey work that had been done.
All that looked at though was what was based on the National Registry of Historic Places slide. Okay, so you didn't necessarily consider every building that's out there to whether it's got local historic significance. And there's a difference there. That's what this was supposed to be, take place, was to look at everything and figure out what it was, it is. It hasn't happened.
That wasn't in the scope of work though.
It was talked about when the committee was put together. I don't know how you wrote the scope of work. It's not how this committee was formed.
Again, we need to have something that we're discussing when we could talk about everything or this area. That doesn't mean anything. Let's define the boundaries. Is our project area from First to Railroad to Grand? No demolitions within that area? Did somebody make that motion? I made a motion. You can vote it up or down. We got to start somewhere.
I think we're having a conversation about it, Steve.
Well, I was just saying
Because it overlaps into another topic that's relative to it as part of the discussion. And people are free.
We're saying we need to define it.
Yeah, and that's what.
Saying is, that's what we're trying. When Debbie made her comments, they may not be specifically directed to exactly what you're saying. But in terms of the overall understanding of it, it makes sense. Because what she's saying is, if you vote no on this, then you're probably going to support the next motion that somebody's going to make to support the red zone. And that's what's going to be on the table.
Yeah.
The small area of contributing buildings or the red zone. Now, it's not part of this motion. It's not part of this vote, except for one component of it, and that's the one piece. Do we want to deal with just contributing buildings? That's your motion. That's what you'd asked, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so when you're ready to take a vote, that's what it's going to be on. But understand, if it doesn't pass, forth probably another motion.
Sure.
To incorporate the.
That's the whole.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think, and again, I would wholeheartedly agree with the eloquent comments that Debbie has made in reference to us taking into consideration and showing maturity and respect in these buildings that are much older than we are.
Absolutely. Is there more discussion on the motion on the table
This is the regular.
regarding the area of the historic registry? Are we ready to vote? Okay, I'm taking that as a yes. So the motion on the table is a 6-month demolition moratorium on contributing buildings in the historic register district. All in favor, aye?
Or do you want to do a voice vote?
You don't need to go one by one, just
raise hands.
I do want to get a clarification. Since it specifically say contributing buildings, then it follows that you can demolish those buildings that are considered non-contributing, correct?
Into this motion, yes.
Okay.
All in favor of this motion?
Oh, should we add a date to like contributing as of certain date? So that
This is,
This is-
where it's defined
As a-
already.
Of the national, yeah.
I guess rather than rather than just do a yay, nay, I think we ought to do a roll call vote.
Or we can just show of hands.
We also define what contributing means so everybody understands. Do you know what I mean?
So
Contributing is what it's been defined by the National Register Historic District.
To be historic.
yeah, that is,
That's 54 buildings.
yes. So that is that map.
Remaining ones are non-contributing and they can be bulldozed. Is that correct? If we say yes,
By the where the motions were to correct, Mark.
Yep. Is everyone clear on that information?
Things out of there.
Okay.
Yep, clear.
Okay, so all in favor of this motion, I would be your hand up. And then,
There's somebody on team.
and then teams,
We have 2, 3. So Deb, Julie, and Steph have their hands up.
Is that for questions or voting?
I'll let them unmute themselves and clarify, but I'm assuming
Please do.
it popped up as soon as she asked, so I'm
You
assuming
might-
it's for the vote. Would you like to, people online, would you like to unmute yourself and just say if you voted or not for it?
I'm on all of them.
Julie votes yes.
Debbie votes yes.
Does Debbie know?
Us is online.
I don't think so.
I think Debbie understands that.
Stephanie.
Debbie?
Yes.
I don't think she would vote yes.
Just to clarify, the vote is for demolition moratorium on contributing buildings.
I understand that. I would have preferred to make an amendment to extend this to the full red zone, but this is like a subset of a greater set. So to me, we're approving the subset, but then I would, after this, like to move to extend it to a greater set. So that's why I'm voting yes on this subset. So however
somewhere.
you want to clarify that, I am not voting to demolish buildings that are not contributing. I am only voting first to save buildings that are contributing.
Okay, absolutely.
And Stephanie, she messaged in and she said she votes yes.
Oh, yes, okay,
That is a part of the conversation that's recorded. We can go back and look at it.
okay. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'd vote yes as well with Debbie's clarification.
7. I as well, 8.
Okay.
There's another one.
Okay, can everybody raise
Raise your
their
hand,
hand?
please.
Because Christine's sitting there trying to count hands and.
I've got short arms.
8.
Okay. Opposed?
Opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm abstaining.
Any online?
Besides those 3 on the committee.
I'm not really understanding that.
5 no's? Okay. All right, and the motion carries. So there's, motion passes the 6-month demolition moratorium on contributing buildings in the historic registry district.
I'd like to make.
Can we?
Yes.
Hold on just a moment. Can we clarify, like this will go to city council, like?
Recommendation.
As a
This is
recommendation.
not. The city council likes that open, correct?
Yep. Moratorium's
This is a recommendation for the, so that's clear. That this is, today go into effect.
Correct. Yeah, we're passing on.
This has to go to council still.
Yeah, this would be
Monday.
Just to make sure everyone understands that.
Monday, right? Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Now, do we have another?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that we consider
Okay, hold on.
expanding the demolition moratorium on contributing buildings to include all buildings in the red area.
Is there a second?
I'll second that one.
Okay.
Typing it up so she.
Say it to me again. I need to make sure we get it.
I am going to make a motion that we extend the moratorium on contributing buildings in the existing historic registered district to include all buildings in the red area put it on the map.
Different.
And I'll second that motion.
Nate seconds. We need to open up for discussion.
Should have.
Can I also, can I clarify, just for the record, so that we're not calling it just a red district? It's the Valley Junction mixed use district. That's the red district.
Yes, Valley Junction mixed use.
Valley Junction mixed use.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Mike's raising his hand.
Yes. Mike?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused at what are contributing buildings outside of the National Register District. We don't have those identified, do we?
We are not
Non-contributing.
addressing contributing buildings, we're addressing all buildings.
She didn't put
Okay,
non.
it says contributing buildings on the screen, that's why.
I intended to say all.
Okay, that makes sense then. Thank you.
Yeah.
Then you just found a way to reverse.
Then the moratorium on contributing
It would be
buildings.
no different.
All buildings in the red area. I thought the way you wrote it perfect.
I would,
This whole process, that's fun.
Include all buildings.
yeah, you want all buildings.
All buildings.
How didn't you mean all buildings within the area? There's.
Yes.
Okay. I'll say contribute all buildings.
Yes.
That's correct.
For the 6-month period, Ralph?
I think the 6 months would be.
It should have been
based on the conversation.
an amendment.
Just to clarify.
Have a motion, you need a second.
I already seconded it.
Nate.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Nate, thank you.
Is it its own standalone or is it an amendment to what already has occurred?
It would be new.
Either one works.
New amendment.
And we consider an amendment.
Yes, Renee.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Can we consider amendment or is it too late per Robert Rules order?
Motion second, whether or not they would accept.
Because all we're doing is reversing the vote on the first.
Right.
So it's an amendment to be considered, I would think.
Either one works.
I think you can take it as a separate motion.
Separate motion. It just expands the area.
We'll vote it up or vote it down, so.
I think it,
We have a couple comments here. Steve and Scott, you guys had your hands up too, and then we'll get to public comment.
I just want to clarify, so everybody knows which buildings we're talking about. The black ones on the map are the contributing buildings. So it's in the historic district. There are no contributing buildings outside that area. That is yet to be determined. So, you know, I'm looking at, what's that, 143 Street? 110, which is 130 and one was it 128, 130, teammates, handlebar because those open completely changed. 200 4th Street, 405, 403, Maple, Two Oaks Wealth, Cooper's, Nightingale, and Alexander's Photo, which was built in the last 20 years. Selzer and Company, 304 has already been demolished, and 511 and 513. So those are non-contributing buildings that under Ralph's new motion would not be able to be demolished. And further up to the north in the red.
you're saying no buildings contributing or not.
I think in terms of the general population, people consider those buildings historic value.
Some of these buildings are much younger than I am. So, you know, I could say, you know, I just want to get general population considered. Let's define it.
But we are defining it as citizens of West Des Moines that live in the Valley Junction. We define it. We write the rules. We call it shadow.
That's what I'm saying. Let's spell that out. I'm not picking on anybody, but is the antique mall historic?
That's up for discussion.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
No, not right now.
Figure that out.
Yeah.
But Steve, to your point with this, G Migs, which is the VFW, and Candle Bar are considered by that survey of Jacobson as a non-contributing building because they've been, his words, drastically changed. But the average person looks at it as it's the original building. It's a historical building. And so that's what this motion's all about, is to look at everything and then determine whether it can be bulldozed or not. Because they considered it only based on the National Registry of Historic Places guidelines, not what the building originally was.
When I had looked into that with my building, in their discussions was even what kind of windows you put in. So if you were to look at my building, it wouldn't meet the guidelines either. Therefore, mine would be non-contributory in that regard.
What do you mean by my building?
I didn't do the roof.
Telephone exchange building.
Supposed to be.
Where she lives?
Yeah, or even how, you remove paint, there was very guidelines. My building wouldn't have been contributory either.
Right.
An example.
I moved the depot, that probably wouldn't be either. If I moved it,
I have a question. What is happening in 6 months? What's happening in 6 months if this is approved by the council?
From what I understand, putting a time frame on a moratorium, we can't just have an open, hey, don't tear, can't tear down buildings for open-ended. But I believe at 6 months, we might have a better idea of where we're going with the process, and maybe in having better talks of maybe a preservation ordinance, possibly.
I think we need to exhaust every effort to get this thing moving. And I don't think we need to drag our feet on this. So I think if it's something that we agree on, it goes to city council, they approve it. I think we need to get our butts in high gear and get going on it.
And it gives you,
At least get us through further.
The talks, looking into this, seeing what's contributing, what's non-contributing, see what buildings need to fix it or fit into this, talk to the business.
And
owners we can.
what expertise in this committee determines if it's historic or not historic?
Well, we're going to have to look on them
Who
and
does that?
Nobody.
They've already said that there's people that do it for a living, that there's criteria. So I'm trying to figure out, we just arbitrarily decide on what is historic. I'm just asking clarifying questions.
I think it's a combination of their expertise plus our historians'
That's
knowledge.
project for the.
Well, I think that some of that was part of the original scope, was it not? I know I brought it up a long time ago that we needed inventory buildings.
Ordinance is not part of their scope of work.
but inventorying the buildings to determine what it was originally was part of this committee's charge. Whether it was part of their scope of work or not, but again, Renee, I think with the local historians, if you will, much like G. Miggs and Candlebar building, there's enough local knowledge to say this is what it was. Just because the windows have been changed or we've done whatever, it still is a historic building based on this, rather than I like that building.
Yeah, and I guess I understand that, Kevin, but I guess I also understand that for historic purposes, there is criteria, is what I'm understanding. Now, let me finish. There's criteria that determines that. So we can all arbitrarily go in and says, it's historic because A, B, C, D. So that's what happens when we do that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm not saying yea or nay to anything in terms of this. I'm just trying to understand what is going to be accomplished in the 6-month period of time with the expertise in this committee of who determines what historic is. Is it because of what we know of the history of the building, or is it based on the historic preservation guidelines that are already documented? That's all I'm asking.
It's going down. If I understand where these folks are coming from, it's going down the path of a local historic preservation district based on what we already know those buildings were. Like Mark said, maybe the depot, the old train depot really isn't a contributing building because it's been moved. Okay, so to me, it's a significant building.
So we don't currently have a list of contributing buildings.
The contributings, but again, there's a lot of buildings out there have local history that don't meet the National Registry criteria.
That's preservation.
That's
in the oldest in Iowa. I think that was a historical building and complex with the West Wing, in West Des Moines. And, you know, this is not being disrespectful, Renee, but I think at the council meeting in P and Z, everything they do is arbitrary. It comes down to what they decide and how they decide it based on the information that they have. And that's the same thing that we're gonna have. To Meredith's point and to Deb's point, it's an element of time to be able to put together a concise answer so we don't go down the path that we've seen in the past where decisions were made and then they could not reverse the course of action. And when people are thinking upper story buildings, you're gonna have renovated apartments, it's gonna enhance the old buildings and the character, and something else happened. I don't think we wanna be in a position to have those types of things happen and create a situation where G-Migs gets torn down. Not that it would, I couldn't imagine that it would, but based on this initial vote, it could. And you wouldn't be able to stop it. So that's kind of what we're looking at is when it expired, we really want 6 more months to look at it. And then we can take and seek out some thoughtful understandings of what historical represents to us, hopefully using our consultant who's done a good job.
Just to expedite things, because this has exceeded our initial time frame. There were some hands up over here. Nick, did you want to make some comments? And then I think it's time that we kind of wrap this up so that way we can go on with the
And
agenda.
Debbie also has her hand up.
Who does? I'm sorry?
Debbie.
Debbie, okay. Nick, are you okay if we get Debbie first? Okay, Debbie, go ahead.
You know, I have a lot of respect for all of the people on the committee and I think we need to make note that there have been at least 2 or 3 questions about which buildings are contributing versus non-contributing. The point that, you know, there's a lot of specifics that go along with the National Historic Preservation Trust guidelines, including things such as buildings in Des Moines that I've been told about, where if the mortar for the original creation of the building came from the Des Moines River, that in order to meet those guidelines, that the sand from the Des Moines River needed to be dug up in order to create the mortar, in order to fulfill the historical accuracy of the building. Now, this is what a developer has told me. I don't know that that's happened with lots of buildings, but at least it's happened with a couple. So I think informing ourselves is extremely important. And if the members of this committee are not sure which buildings we're talking about, I think it is very important that we gather that information so that we can know that we have made an informed decision. You can always pull the plug, but once you've pulled the plug, it's over. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Good point. Nick Loggy, I live in the hood. Point of clarity, you're calling this mixed use. Is this already been rezoned, or are we talking historic Valley Junction business or Valley Junction historic business?
Like, can you show him the picture on here?
Yeah, I mean, essentially it is this.
Valley Junction.
Mike's trying to tell you. Go ahead, Mike.
Nick, the area we're showing in red is the same as the historic Valley Junction Business District, except that we don't go up to the 500 block, right? So we cut off the top of it, but otherwise it's the same.
Okay. And then my second point is when the mayor set up this, I was under the impression this committee was supposed to decide what was historic based on the historic documents you have in your folders. So it seems to me you guys are determining what's historic, what's not. Am I correct? Is that the way that should be interpreted?
What?
Anyone?
Is that your
That was not my impression of.
I don't think we have that ability or expertise.
The impression was not that we would go and literally review every single address. But can someone back me up? Like Scott, were you under that impression that we were supposed to review every single building?
No,
and
that wasn't
address?
my understanding, no.
Meredith?
I, definitely am for protection of the historically designated contributing buildings. I don't know. There may be, I wonder kind of what would be an appropriate way to do that. Determine which ones are.
And I think that's another issue too. I mean, the motion, I think this is for all buildings. So I think at this point, the motion doesn't really factor in what's historical and what's not at this point. So I think that can be a conversation for another time. But I think in order to expedite for the sake of tonight, if there's no other discussion, I think we can go ahead and proceed with the vote and then go ahead to the agenda. And then I think we can go ahead and have those discussions at another time. Yes, Scott.
Can I just ask one quick clarifying question, Ralph, just to make sure I understand your motion? Are you proposing to extend the entire moratorium as it's currently written for this area, or just a moratorium on demolition? It doesn't actually impact me directly, but I know there are property owners in Valley Junction that would potentially want to use the.
If I get it right, we have design guidelines in place that represent the information that's necessary for the existing building owners and people in that area to be able to work on their building. What we are doing here is we're saying no demolition of any building that would permanently affect, obviously, building, because it won't be there anymore. We're going to wait 6 months until we can determine. And at that point in time, like Meredith says, there'll be a lot of other things, topics beyond what we're talking about tonight that will, have an effect on it. How do we define a historical building? Well, maybe we want to use the National Historic Record for that or whatever, the register. Maybe we don't, because as Debbie had alluded to, we don't want to dig sand out of the Des Moines River because that's really an expensive process. I've remodeled projects in Sherman Hills. I know what it's like to be scrutinized on the smallest architectural details, which make no sense.
I think the point of clarification that Scott was asking about is that just says moratorium.
Yeah.
In the moratorium.
It was demolition.
Tear down more.
Tear down.
I wasn't trying to get, I just want to make sure I understood, because I understand.
Head says time on it, demolition.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Praise God when you don't ask anymore, so I can hear you.
Yeah, well, I should take it off.
Yeah, there you go.
Brought it up.
Yeah.
We're good to go?
Yeah, thank you very much for.
When he was saying that, he was saying that, extend the previous.
I think we do need the time. I really do to explore this. I mean, look at the passion in the room.
I have lots of passion.
I do.
Yeah.
I just have one point to make sure we all remember it. 111 Fifth Street did come in front of us. Was that probably 5 months ago now or something? And one of those options, I know, but it's not explicitly mentioned in that. How do we make sure that do they get a pass?
Anything that's already approved, yeah.
That it's been done.
Today, or I just gotta make sure.
If you would have a recommendation, I would entertain now that if you felt that was necessary. I'm just assuming that everything that has been approved in the past is approved and we're not going to go back on that.
I'm not going on assumptions anymore.
You want to go as of current date or something like that, or?
We can literally write out, moratorium on demolition of loans, except.
So there's not any ambiguity. It's probably best to state the address.
Yeah.
Except for
111.
On this street, if that's where you guys want to go.
Is it 111 and 113? Because there are two separate addresses.
It is, yeah.
Yes, Steve?
Am I doing this?
So
Yeah, that would.
going off this, so to nail down just a little more, what if a building burns down, derecho? What, and that's maybe a question for council and staff. So a disastrous thing happens to a building, can't tear it down for 6 months or what? How does that work?
I think those buildings in that time frame would sit. Anyway.
Absolutely. Stephen.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I think like what Meredith talked about, we shouldn't put a microscope on this.
Yeah.
No, but I just want to make sure if one of these buildings, any of these buildings catches fire, what happens? I'm asking for guidance here.
Fire will rate.
Excuse me.
City council. It will be cleaned up immediately, I'm sure.
Okay, I mean, I just.
He wants to cover all his bases.
Do you think that that should be added as some type of addendum or a caveat?
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to be in a motion. I just kind of want clarification from the city. If something disastrous happens to a building, do we say we can't touch it or what?
Your building department is not going to let some building that's structurally unsound because of a fire or windstorm, they're not going to allow it to stand.
I think you're correct, Kevin. When public safety issues get involved,
okay,
buildings declared unsafe.
Yes.
I'm just asking.
All bets are off at that.
Yes.
Okay.
In all legalese terms, we're talking about demolition there, not acts of God or anything else.
Right.
So I think that.
There you go.
clarification.
There you go.
Okay, any other discussion?
Man-made demolition.
All right, I think we're
Natural.
ready for a vote. So we'll do a raise of hands again. Okay, so motion is to extend the moratorium on demolition of all buildings in Valley Junction mixed use area for 6 months, except for 111 and 113 Fish Stray. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's the people on.
And how many online?
Debbie went up and came down.
The little hand. See a hand.
His was up.
Waving at us. 10.
Debbie, if you can indicate which way you wanted to vote on that, please.
There's a hand.
There it is.
Sorry, I was clicking my microphone. I would vote for the motion as it was originally designed because I think we're really muddying the waters, but so I'm not sure how to vote.
Okay, take.
No.
I definitely believe in the first part of the motion.
Okay.
Sounds like.
You can abstain.
Well,
If
you
we-
need to either abstain or vote yes or no.
I understand that. That's
Yeah.
why I raised my hand.
She got a hand up.
Because I'm voting for it, but I wish we had not complicated it. That's just a comment, sorry.
Okay, so that's affirmative, and then, so that's 11. We have Julie or Steph.
12.
Okay. Opposed? Abstentions? Mitchell?
Opposed,
The author.
online.
Anyone online?
Julie's not going either way.
Julie opposes.
Okay,
Julie
thank you.
opposes, okay.
Yeah.
So that makes 13. Yep, that's the right number.
Can we get into the meat and potatoes of this now?
Okay, all right, and the motion carries, and we will make a recommendation to council to extend the moratorium for demolition only. Okay, moving on, discussion of design guidance for railroad district. Thank you, everyone.
All right, Erin's gonna take you through this, so she's getting ready to pull it up right now.
All right. Can everyone hear me and see the teal screen here? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, first to start, we are starting with the railroad versus transitional because the mixed use commercial district, which was just reviewed and recommended by everyone here as well as planning and zoning. There's a lot of continuity and connection between that district and Railroad Avenue. So we are going to dive in and cover it first. As a quick recap, we're looking at pages 53 through 67. It was brought up earlier, but zoning particularly is going to be very important when it comes to railroad. There's a lot of considerations here that will need to be looked at in terms of interfacing uses, adjacent residential, setbacks and buffering, as well as requiring parking and just overall safe circulation. So kudos on the railroad crosswalks presented at the start of the presentation, but just want to add that because zoning really is important overall, but very specific to railroad.
As a reminder, these are the general locations in blue that we're looking at. At the end of the presentation, I'll highlight a few considerations that we're looking to. One is over here, looking to make it mixed industrial. It kind of caters to that more. And then the consideration of the areas south of railroad on either side here, possibly allowing for more height. But we can cover that at the end. I want to provide the context first of what we're looking at in general. As a quick recap, this is the findings from our visual preference survey. These were what was informed through the comments and the votes. Generally, that Railroad Avenue is very auto-oriented, so design as part of that is really important. That comes through with the screening, safety, circulation. But the general idea is that there needs to be a cohesive and connected feel to the adjacent Valley Junction district and mixed-use commercial. Building heights in general, we're still at the 1 to 3 cap. And then also that destination-oriented uses could be considered here in addition to some residential. So you'll see these elements coming through in the design guidelines. In particular, I went ahead and broke out our typology here into bullets to make it a little bit more digestible, but you see the key words really hitting home with what we're trying to communicate and what we heard through the engagement and the feedback. And this being a similar scale in architecture to that mixed use commercial district. But we're looking at building setbacks and bump outs. We need to create a walkable, inviting environment, and also factoring in the important neighborhoods that are adjacent. So how does that come into play between the buffers, setbacks, building form, and overall design? Another strong element that will be hit on more in the streetscape section is the railroad routes. How do we further celebrate that connection to history, culture, and really level up the focus as part of that identity? So the first section, I've extracted a lot of different pages here, but I am still giving a top level overview. I'm not diving into all of the details. This page here hits on a lot of good aspects that are streamlined throughout the guidelines for Railroad Avenue. That being that you see the existing photo here in the upper right. We're working with a different landscape, here in reference to the mixed use commercial. This area is going to be more visionary. There aren't as many buildings and there is a different just use characteristics of it being a very auto-oriented area. That said, the photo here, you can start to get the idea of how you can create setbacks such that they do carve out pedestrian areas. We were recommending a 5 to 15 foot setback so that the building forms can start to create an environment that is not only inviting, but also safe, and creating spaces that really cater to visitors and a walkable environment. In terms of the architectural design guidelines, you're going to see a lot of reiteration of much of the same details that were carried over from the mixed use commercial. The primary difference, again, is looking at the setbacks being recommended for 5 to 15 feet from the property line. Building form still needs to be very thoughtful in terms of the transitions, particularly in terms of building massing with regards to the adjacent residential. There's also looking to how buildings are situated and siting. These examples here also show a nice example of how you can set back buildings further from the street, but start to create a more pedestrian-oriented environment. The photos here, I wanted to highlight just some interesting ideas as development comes in. Corner options have some opportunities for configuration of buildings such that you're able to carve out these nice pedestrian spaces. Again, we're working with an auto-oriented corridor along Railroad. And so much of the feedback that was received through public comment was, we want to see slow progression towards 2 to 3 story buildings, but clearly this needs to be a safe and inviting corridor. So how to do that? Design of buildings can be done in creative and thoughtful ways such that you not only create these plaza areas, but you're also able to create really dynamic retail fronts as well as residential above. Keeping in mind that these buildings would need to be sited such that they provide parking and that there isn't any overshadowing of these adjacent residential uses. So that was one of the primary comments that came through during our neighborhood workshop. Again, buildings don't stand alone, and context is streamlined in what we tried to touch on here. You'll also notice a lot of reiteration in some of the discouraged building and architectural types. There was a lot of consistency between the feedback on Railroad as well as the mixed use commercial district. So you do see those more modern, large banding examples here that were discouraged in that section. One of the differences also in some of the imagery here that I do want to hit on is we included some images of more siding, that can get at some of the historic railroad elements. So you do see some of more examples of dormers and some of the wood materials, shaker style here that weren't included in the commercial district. We also touched on the ground level details. So looking again at window patterns, that historic need for them. This example is actually from an old railroad depot that was turned into a public market. The importance of activating ground floor, but also having it be safe. So if you're going to have patios, how is that buffered? Especially if not on a side street, but an adjacent to Railroad Avenue. Safety needs to be considered. And so if there is fencing here that contains folks and children, those are important aspects in the design and the guidelines. In terms of the streetscape area, some top level things that I want to hit on here is one, there's a lot of opportunity to celebrate the railroad roots and the history in really very cool, innovative ways. The example earlier about crosswalks that look like railroad ties, that goes back to some checkpoints with engineering and making sure that checks out. But this example here on the lower left, this is actually from Watkins Glen, New York. It's a rate car town, and they painted their crosswalks here to be the checkerboard. So that's certainly those ideas can come through. And that's actually my sister's legs and my nephew. So in terms of getting into some of those kind of visionary ideas, we did want to provide a lot of food for thought there. Site enhancements should certainly build on that character with this opening page starts to hit on. We also talk about murals, providing a really great opportunity there. That was discussed at our very first meeting that Mike and I were a part of. But how can you further really showcase the personality of the place? And I know this is near and dear to Debbie's heart, but these are just a few examples of local murals. This is along the Mississippi River in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. You can also do really great photorealist murals. As well as very, vibrant botanical. So murals present a really great opportunity to not only hit on history, but to also really celebrate color and make for vibrant kind of site along the railroad. I did reach out to the West Des Moines Historical Society. There are a wealth of really great historic photos in addition to, these ones featured here. And they're looking into how they can provide some of those to us as reference into the document as a whole. I was happy to learn that I believe this is Scott Hatfield's great aunt up here.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, sitting up here. So again, some really good opportunities. And so to tie in with local artists.
Oh, I love it. That's amazing.
Wayfinding signage. So a really important aspect is if you're on Railroad, how do you know that 5th Street is right around the corner? How do you know that Foundry is down across Railroad? And wayfinding signage is a really important way to do that. The wayfinding signage on Railroad can be pedestrian oriented. It also should somewhat be take different forms, more prominent forms. So you can see here, this is a very pedestrian oriented. I think this is about 6 feet tall versus a taller kind of wayfinding district sign. Wayfinding was stressed throughout the public engagement that we heard as really connecting the parts of the whole to make it an altogether very cohesive area. Pedway and patios, you know, we don't have the great little alleyways, ped spaces that 5th Street has already, although you can create those. That is an opportunity in building design where those gangways can be created. And so when development comes in, it's certainly something to look to, because that's an opportunity that we want to further create those spaces in cool collected areas. Here we also look to, you know, bringing in defined edges of plazas, decorative lighting, which was big within the mixed use commercial district, but opportunities for festoon lighting, which is the overhead lighting, to really then make the statement that these are pedestrian spaces, but do it in a muted way where it's not going to affect surrounding residential, that it would be shielded, or in an area that's, you know, like the L building that I showed earlier, configured where that is shielded and contained. Similar to murals, there's some great opportunities to celebrate the railroad district or the industrial kind of nature thing, lighting. The example of lighting you see here is from Larimer Square, which is a historic district in Colorado. And using banners to really showcase different types of branding and identity. Traffic calming crossings are a very top priority along Railroad. So we did spend a good chunk of these chapters in the streetscape to note and hit on those aspects about crosswalks, not only you know, along Railroad, across those streets, but also internal. So if there's a development going in and we're requiring parking, those parking lots across the curb cuts should have a crosswalk. Things should be very intuitive and clearly demarcated. We're also recommending that curb cuts be minimized, meaning different developments should share a curb cut, and parking in the rear, located in the rear behind the buildings, should be shared. Again, this creates for a more walkable environment. There's less breaks along the sidewalk edge, and it just creates more pedestrian spaces. The last point, which is also very important, and again, this gets back into the zoning aspect, but looking at the landscaping, the parking, the screening, you know, the relationship between adjacent uses, and making sure that, you know, parking areas, adjacent residential, pedestrian walkways, these all need to be buffered, whether it's through landscape screening or other measures. And again, those specifics get more enhanced through the zoning updates. And then just some examples here of different parking lots. These are, you know, probably a lot bigger than what would be along Railroad. But if you combine different uses, you know, there can be a real opportunity there for those rear behind buildings to connect their parking lots, to have nice seamless sidewalks and crosswalks internal. So it makes for a really safe pedestrian environment while also providing landscaping such that it's nice to look at. We do allow or make the note here that parking structures could also be appropriate pending review and code compliance. There's a lot of great examples of parking structures done right these days. And while that's not something that we focused on in the mixed use commercial district because we don't want to promote tear downs there, in the railroad area, it could be an innovative way to provide for parking and really combine parking availability for varying developments.
Yes.
And then finally, just as I said here, more on landscaping and proper screening. We recognize here that the adjacent uses and the compatibility of that and sight lines is really important. You know, there's ways of doing vertical gardens, decorative screening to really soften the appearance of elements. And again, parking lot landscaping throughout can serve a whole variety of uses. And there's lots of different examples in the guidelines of how those can be done and done right. And clearly screening of dumpsters, making sure that they're not only screened, but that, you know, the gate sides concealed from view, that, you know, the little details here are clearly spelled out. So just to recap, before diving into discussion, and I'm happy to circulate back on any of the pages here, but you know, it rings true to the feedback that we received. We do speak to the bump outs as well and ways in which you can create for these more pedestrian spaces, even along a more clearly auto-oriented corridor like railroad. So the last element is what I referenced earlier, which was this area here. We're considering making mixed industrial. We haven't covered that yet. We will be securing your input and desired direction on those guidelines and sharing images and those kind of things down the line. But we thought that made better sense. And in looking at the areas south of Railroad here, for reference, this is where the foundry is. When you're thinking through the different type of unique destinations, boutique hotel, or different experiential or interesting restaurant experience, rooftop dining, you name it, we do think that given these areas slightly more remote, that additional height and generally the same guidelines as what I just ran through here, because we want them to be cohesive in look and feel, but that additional height could be good and allow for some cool potential in development there.
Yeah, cool.
So with that, I'll turn it over, and happy again to reference back any pages, but general discussion on thoughts, feedback, and points is welcome.
I'd love to start the discussion. You know, I love that Valley Junction is so filled with character, and I would love for us to keep that and continue that into the railroad area. And if you think about all the traffic that goes on railroad every day, I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of cars. I really feel like this is our time to shine. Railroad Avenue right now, it could shine better, right? There's some giggles over here. It could shine better. And if we leverage railroad as the gateway to our incredible Valley Junction area, if we plan it beautifully, if it kind of mirrors and matches that, we get creative. I think we should think big. I love when she said hotel, because think about all the visitors that could stay there. But let's think big on the railroad area. It's the way that draws people in to that historic Valley Junction district. And I just think we could really brighten this whole area up, you guys. It would be incredible. We have a really unique opportunity here, really unique.
And I think too, and maybe it's, you kind of do two different kind of designs, like maybe on South of Railroad, maybe that's kind of like the bigger area, you know, and maybe Railroad north of area, you know, you still stick with that like 3-story max, you know, because you are going to have some residents that kind of back up to some of the areas in there and everything too,
I
but
think that's what Aaron's proposing.
yeah, yep, absolutely.
So we're still doing the stepping theory there. If I understood that.
Yeah.
Can I go again?
Yeah.
So it talked about like green space, buffer spaces, and I'm just asking the question just to get opinions. You're backing up to residential like that. Do we need to almost put like a fencing screen in there? Kind of break that up. That way when you're not, looking out your side window, you're seeing 20 or 30 cars in your side yard. I'm just asking.
But how would,
Yeah, buffer, sometimes.
Otherwise you'd need taller shrubs, something that, little 1-foot shrubs aren't going to do it. So I'm just asking, just being mindful of the residents that have to look at that all day.
because like right now, like when I go to Casey's for lunch, there's a fence between that and the residents right there, right?
Correct.
And some of the other businesses, so I would assume that it would be the same. And I think that's what they're trying to say, that it would be a buffer similar to that,
I
right?
think it was saying greenery, like a greenery or shrub.
Greenery or screening of some sort, right?
Is it either or are you recommending greenery?
It's a good caveat to discuss. In the mixed use commercial, it was specifically noted, to go with the landscaping over fencing, which we did. Here, we haven't explicitly said no fencing. We said no chain link, but we haven't said no fencing because it probably lends itself to fencing in some regard. And so we kept it general at this point. I think that can be extrapolated more as well as detailed in zoning. But what are folks' thoughts on allowing a pairing of, the traditional kind of wrought iron fencing that you see paired with landscaping to soften it on the rear of lot lines?
Better like a PVC fence.
Yeah.
I think that looks really
Maybe
nice.
with a little bit more privacy.
Yeah, just being
Something
respectful.
nice,
of-
okay.
Yeah,
You're thinking more solid fencing.
I would think so.
yeah, it's open for discussion. I mean,
We address that by buffering.
Yes.
We create landscape buffers and things like that. Some of it's done with the altering the terrain in terms of the topography. You'll have hills intermittently with trees rolling through it. When I've built up against busy streets, residential homes, initially they look at it and go, oh, it's a busy street. After that berming goes in, the trees start to mature. It becomes, I have a private area in my backyard
yeah, I
and
mean,
it's beautiful.
as we're addressing it,
Community. I think that's
I just want to make sure we're not
That help
talking
with-
1 foot
no.
or something.
That also
It
helps.
actually allows a 6-foot fence, or you can do a landscape buffer area. The problem we're gonna have with landscape buffer areas there is that you're only talking about an area that's 3 lots deep.
Yeah, you don't got much
Not a
room.
lot of room.
But maybe you do look at fencing. I don't know. That's why I just brought it up. Just curious what everybody's opinion was on it.
That was my question. Aaron, are you talking about, because in some of these areas, it looks like you're talking about maybe 5 lots to the north from Railroad, or how many lots are you looking at this being extended north?
In terms of the geography,
Yeah, on the north side of Railroad where you've got it as RA, how many lots? Because down here, on 3rd Street, based on these driveways, it looks like we're talking 4, maybe 5 lots. Maybe my eyes aren't real good, but that's what it looks like to me.
yeah. Mike, do you know offhand?
We just split the difference between, graphically, we just did it quickly to split the difference between Railroad and Maple, but practically, I think you are talking 3 or 4 lots, probably.
Yeah.
Because my concern is, there's been a lot of discussion about needing affordable housing in West Des Moines. I'm not totally understanding why we're looking at taking affordable single-family housing and making it
Every day.
commercial. To me, all of the stuff that you got south of Railroad makes perfect sense. But I just don't understand why we would take single-family housing and then even, farther north or west rather, where you've got the mixed industrial. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand how we can talk about needing affordable housing, but yet we're taking housing away.
I think as it is now, 3 in. I think as it is now, it's 3 in. From 1st through.
Sorry.
Well, he was.
Yeah, Mike, you were gonna respond to Kevin's question there.
Yeah, I was. Right. So, well, one, we can look at the area that we drew, right? There are some commercial buildings along there, particularly, 6th to 8th in that range. There are more commercial buildings that could be redeveloped, and I don't think that would be as big a problem. I do understand your point about some of the blocks that are all single family essentially, and the issue of affordability. So maybe we do look at the boundary a little bit closer on that, and the condition of those homes and that kind of thing. I think it's a valid point.
Well, again, Mike, the condition of the home, I guess, isn't necessarily I don't think should be a deciding factor on it. I mean, they can still, nothing's fallen down in those areas. It's not like everything's, dilapidated and fallen down. I'm very much in favor of what you're recommending in some of the existing commercial. I'm not sure you're gonna get Darren Brown to sell off his property at 6th and Railroad up to Maple, but I just don't see why we would take single family housing out.
I respect his point of view on that. And then also, kind of like she's saying, these existing buildings, I think we should tie that theme in. So try to keep that character of Fifth Street, maybe utilize it more on Railroad. If you're going to use a little bit more modern stuff, take it south of the tracks.
The other thing to talk about too is in new developments. So you're taking an empty field and turning it into whatever. So let's say 60th and Mills, for example. You've got single family up at Glen Oaks. And then you're putting in, whether it be apartments or commercial, whatever. So even with those, they kind of stair step back. So you don't have your huge buildings up against single family. Down in here, I'm not sure how you're ever going to be able to buffer with that when the property backs up to somebody's backyard. So how do you get a 2-story building in there when you got a 1-story house and make it work?
Yeah, we can take a closer look at like Mike said, these are softer boundary lines at this point, and also get a little creative. I know when Ed was initially doing some of the illustrations, the opening chapter illustration where it just shows kind of an example, looking at the reality of siting and the depth of the lots and how that equates to parking in the rear, and the different ingredients involved.
I just think we need to, I think we need to look at this as though, that's each of your houses next to a 2-story building. How would you like it?
Or a museum, whatever we do.
But there are some houses in the residential area that are even 3 stories that are taller than buildings, right?
True. Not very many.
Houses are totally different than commercial buildings. Slide point, well, you got a 2-story against a 1-story house. That's not even an apples to watermelon comparison. I mean, you're talking about a bigger commercial building. I just think we need to look at it from somebody else's perspective.
Is the picture essentially, just to get clarification, these are guidelines, these are part of the plans, idea, which is, by the way, a great idea. And then, but the implementation is going to fall to potentially the city or private investment and things like that to make it a reality. Do you develop a master plan using these concepts? How do you do that?
I'll let Mike chime in, but it can be done. We don't get down into the gritty of, showing what should go there, because there should be flexibility. However, we can provide, similar to what we did in terms of showcasing the step down height diagrams in the mixed use commercial, there can be theoretical examples of how parking is located. Buildings provide step down heights to be cognizant of adjacent uses, heights of buffering, and those type of ingredients. Those kind of renderings are helpful because they're still general, but they give the reality of the situation without dictating the specifics of design. And I think what we're speaking to here is the design of what we carried over from the mixed use commercial is simpatico, but it really comes down to where the pieces lie on the lot and how they come together that really affects the adjacencies.
Aaron, I would find that extremely helpful when we could visualize the concept. And I fall in line with some of the things you're talking about. We could see the reality of the railroad corridor. If you all could make that happen, at least from my perspective, I mean, depends on the rest of the group. I think it'd be great to conceptualize that.
It would be cool. It might be hard though. I mean, it'd be neat if we could build a wish list, but then you would want to go to the developers and say, hey, here's kind of our wish list for this area. I don't know. I don't know how we would do that, but.
I think conceptualizing it will allow them to recommend some of the things that we're doing, like 15-foot setback. You know, so you have a pedestrian area that's safe, landscaping, things like that. Some of those things, just to kind of give us the flavor. And I think it could be used to help, if we all like the idea, it could be used to motivate at least 2 city council members to work with us.
Actually, I wouldn't mind putting together, I love doing this. I geek out on this pretty hard, but I'd love to put together kind of a list of, what do we vision for these areas? They're, certainly south of Railroad is a blank slate right now, except the hall, and he's gone. Which love that area, right? It's amazing and miraculous what he did with that building. So that would be kind of cool. And, sometimes if you wish for things, they come true. And, word will get around. They want to do a museum that looks like a Pullman car, or they want a restaurant like the Iowa City restaurant called the Pullman. There could be a lot of things we could dream up. Be kind of a fun, actually, exercise. I don't know if we all want to do that, but I like to get creative. Kevin sort of hummed and hawed a little bit, but.
Debbie
like
had a
that.
comment.
Debbie?
Oh, Stephanie did.
Oh, Stephanie?
And she's on her ear pod, so she can't jump in.
Got it.
She did raise her hand. She wanted me to read it for her. She said, I think it's important to reinforce that these guidelines would apply to properties that are rehabbed and built organically. There is no coordinated effort to seize property from existing commercial or residential property owners. This is a rumor that is circulating widely and frequently and has been taken up in residents' minds of many, despite no evidence of that happening.
Correct. This is for new development going in. This isn't requiring any change to existing.
Yeah. I like
If-
Catherine's idea.
If you want, I think what I'm hearing, is you would like some more information and some more potential what things would look like. We'll take a look also at the distances in terms of how deep, how many lots we're talking about. And we'll take a look at what's there now. And so that we can tell you, okay, if you do this, here's how many houses potentially you would affect, or how many businesses are in this area, that type of thing. That's what I think I'm hearing from you, Kevin.
I just don't think it's right to take single family housing. I mean, even if you don't have your house for sale, somebody throws enough money at you, you're gonna sell it. And then the neighbor next door, 2 doors north, they've got to live with it. Again, how do we say that we need affordable housing, but yet now we're gonna risk bulldozing houses for commercial buildings?
Well, maybe we define that area a little bit more succinctly, Kevin.
We can work with the consultant to do that.
Waggy, I still live in the hood. God. But when Scott tried to build Fourth and Railroad here, he squeezed a very large building into a very small lot. He was going to site the building, and sidewalk 15 feet to the alley, and from the jogging trail halfway across that. The parking was off the property line between the next resident. What I'm trying to say, if you're going to do this, you're going to put in, someone's going to put in a restaurant, you have to follow setbacks, noise ordinances. I mean, how would you like to live right behind a restaurant that's open till 10 o'clock? Parking's in the rear, right, Aaron?
Yeah, parking is in the rear or in a structure. Yeah.
All right. So you've got noise all night long. If they're open till 10 o'clock, you've got light wash. You've got a lit building side that you're going to look at through your shades and things like that. So be careful. If you're gonna do this, you better find some strict commercial zoning regulations to allow this to go in next to a residence. Otherwise, you're just like, well, Scott was gonna try and do a Portland Railroad.
You don't want Top Golf right next door to a house?
No,
You sure?
don't.
I'm
No,
being sarcastic.
It's a valid point. We do have in the guidelines the note on, you know, we don't want nuisances, the noise, the light. I think that the opportunity for south of Railroad does provide a lot more flexibility there, just given, you know, the different type of uses that could be explored. So it's a valid point in terms of where we look to land uses on the north versus south. But there are recommendations currently in the guidelines that spell that out and would be furthered through the zoning.
And maybe we build that parking garage that looks cool, because you can, like you had mentioned, they are building parking garages that look cool and you have no idea it's a parking garage until you're like, oh, that's a parking garage. That's wild. I thought it was an old historic building. That's so cool. And maybe that's south of Valley Junction. And then we have a light, of course. We're gonna have a crosswalk that looks like railroad tracks, right? Adorable. Or maybe even a bridge going over railroad, you know, that's, you know, I know super expensive, but let's get creative. And that's maybe where the parking is alleviated is on that south side. So that could be an option, because I know parking is a concern.
Yeah, Kellen Beck, 602 Fifth. That's all great ideas, but you know, those were all the same ideas we talked about asking to be done before. You know, so now all of a sudden it's a great idea. The other one, you talked about the height restrictions. How can you do a height restriction with a parking garage? I mean, most of these houses are 1.5 story houses. 2-story garage is gonna be it.
I think on the south.
On the south.
On the south side.
Talking south side of Railroad.
South side of Railroad.
And the one I know since we kind of bought it is the smell, especially with the restaurant. Last thing I want is smell refried beans 24 hours a day. So keep those in mind.
Refried beans.
Oh, Brenda Klossman, 136 Third. I love the ideas though. And we live very close. We just live a block off Railroad. Railroad is a busy street.
Yes.
I love the idea of some patios, but don't put a patio facing Railroad. So when you do your drawings, I love the idea of the alleys being enhanced.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps the patios could go up the alley. Because spend some time walking up and down Railroad and the fumes and the cars, and that's just a very, very busy street. I can't imagine people would want to have outdoor dining on Railroad. But I do love the idea, but I think look at the alleys as being, especially in that 100 block, as being used. Because Railroad, it's hostile. I walk it a lot.
You know, Brenda, you bring up a really good point. Not only, you know, fumes, everything, but it is loud down there. I know we've had like, you know, even the walking tour that Steve put on, trying to have conversations down there with cars and then trains coming through. So that definitely does bring up a good point that I think it would look cool and stuff, and maybe on off traffic times maybe, but yeah, I think the alleyways might be an interesting aspect. Yeah.
And yeah, I would agree. I think, and Aaron, you touched on this a little bit, but the bump out idea, you know, Railroad Avenue, 5 lanes wide, it's 35 miles an hour. And I challenge anybody to drive 35 and not get somebody up their bumper.
Right, right.
You know, I feel like bump outs and a road diet and narrowing that down is the only way it's going to be more pedestrian oriented. I mean, I think the last thing anybody would want to see is a lot of pretty stuff and blade signs and flowers and have traffic still going by at 45 miles an hour and still uncomfortable to make it walkable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's very valid. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed.
Blaine?
Yeah, Blaine Moore, 606th Street. And I just wanted to make a couple comments here. I love the ideas that you have, Catherine. I think that's great. And I know that a lot of these ideas have been spoken about for years, so I'm glad that we're, circling back to them and there's a lot more support for them. I just would love to say, I think we need to stop this negativity focus towards entertainment. I would have loved to smell of refried green beans next to my house. Instead, I look at an empty strip mall and an empty parking lot every day. So I would love to walk to a restaurant and get some food. So I'd love if comments like that were just ignored from this point forward. I think it was very pointed and very clear what that was. I'm all for more entertainment in the district and, just let's see it all. So.
I vote for a microbrewery. We need one really bad in Valley Junction. Another hand over there. Who wants to start a microbrewery, y'all? Let's talk. Talk.
Any other comments this evening?
What do we like for Altoona?
All righty.
We making a motion?
Tom?
on anything? Okay.
Yes, you have some comments?
Want to get it. So then we'll back with some refinement for the Railroad Avenue area then.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
I promise I wasn't going to speak. Tom Hyde, 138 Fifth. I'm just wondering if maybe this railroad area, it seems like north and south are really kind of two different entities. So, and I hate to create more work, but maybe they need to be differentiated a little bit. That north is maybe there's only a 2-story height restriction, and maybe south you just sky's the limit. And they seem kind of like separate.
Yeah, no.
Either a different criteria.
We're coming to the same conclusion. I agree.
That's all I got. Thanks.
I'm with you.
No, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, like Clyde was saying, we'll kind of reconvene and kind of see what kind of comes from all these conversations tonight and see what you guys have for us based off these conversations.
Yeah, sounds great. We'll do some sketches. We'll do some of that additional work that Clyde talked about on the railroad area. We'll look at the boundaries of that a little bit closer. And then in our next meeting, we'd like to do 2 things if we have time to do it. One, we need to spend some time talking about the transitional area. Maybe it needs to get scaled back. Maybe it needs to have some other modifications. I don't know. But we need to talk about that a little bit more. Sorry. And 2, the area that we're showing for kind of mixed industrial or whatever. We really didn't do much in terms of surveying with you guys in terms of the look and feel and character of that area. So I think maybe we need to do a little mini visual preference survey on what that area could be coming up in the future too. So we'd like to do that at the next meeting as well.
Okay. Awesome. Sounds great. Any other discussion or questions? All righty. I think that sounds good. We'll go ahead and call it for the night and
Next meeting here is
March 9th, I believe, isn't this meeting? Is that correct? All right, everyone be here for a fun-filled night, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Read your book. We promise you we'll get them back.
I'm gonna take mine.